Hi, I am Dr. Sana Hashmi. I'm a fellow at Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation. And this week in my Prince Eye on China column, I wrote about the recent reports regarding the investigation against the incumbent Chinese Defense Minister Tung Chun on the charges of corruption. And I have also dealt with the Chinese President Xi Jinping's crackdown on corruption within the system and mainly the military. And this is something that we have been seeing for a very long time, but I think this has gained momentum at least since 2013 and 14. Then I have also analyzed in the piece how the Chinese internet is viewing Xi's corruption crackdowns and what is the public view on it. So I think it's so important to establish that the purges and the investigations are not really new in China. And definitely, this is not something that is only limited to Xi's administration. As I've already mentioned, that this is something that has been there in China for a very long time, and this is something that has been seen since the establishment of the People's Republic of China, and since the time of Mao Zedong. This has been a common feature of Chinese political landscape. And while many, specifically outside people, journalists, scholars who are outside, they view as something that is used as to consolidate Xi Jinping's power. But these actions are specifically within China are seen as genuine anti-corruption drive. And a closer look reveals a far more complex political maneuver, one that raises crucial questions about, of course, the power consolidation and internal division within Chinese leadership. But apart from that, the extent of corruption that has been there within the Chinese military. When we talk about China, when we talk about how the governance works in China, perhaps there is this perception that it's all under control and this is all led by Xi Jinping and there's hardly any corruption, as this is one man's rule that is going on in China. But specifically since the economic reforms that were introduced in the 1970s, 80s, corruption is something that has seeped in within Chinese political as well as military establishment as well. And this has become a major problem in China now. And but I think this is something that Xi Jinping has taken on him. He has kind of taken initiatives to deal with the issue of corruption, and this is one of the reasons why we have seen so many purges, specifically in the past 10 years. So since Xi Jinping took power, there is hardly any doubt that purges and anti-corruption crackdown campaign these have been a consistent feature of his administration, his leadership. And the first instance was primarily, I think, Po Shilai, who was, when we saw his dramatic fall, he was the former party chief of Chongqing and who was also seen as a potential rival to Xi Jinping. So I think the anti-corruption campaign kind of gained prominence since the dramatic fall of Po Shilai. And today, this anti-corruption drive has intensified within the military. More than in the political leadership, there is much more corruption, the crackdown in the military leadership. And this also makes sense given how China is moving towards and closer to the 2027 PLA modernization goal. So, with Xi cracking down on the breaches of discipline and law across the rank, this has a thing that we have to really pay close attention to. So, just to give a few statistics to date, under Xi administration, over 100 senior officers have faced investigation. And just recently, I think it was just last week, when a high ranking military official, Miao Hua, was kind of investigated again, and that was also announced by the through the official channels as well. But apart from him, we also know, and we last year we discussed a lot about how the former foreign minister Chen Kang have been placed under scrutiny. There were no official responses, no official clarification as to what happened to him, where is he right now, and why was he removed. But all these developments lead us to a question, that is this really about cleaning the house, or is it about consolidating Xi's power? What are the implications that China will be facing in times to come? So many of these purges, particularly within the People's Liberation Army, are viewed by some as necessary, some in China as necessary steps to tackle corruption. as this has been a long-standing issue in China, this is, of course, something that has got public support within China. From the early days of the PRC, anti corruption campaigns have been a part of the political fabric. However, what we are seeing right now is that under Xi's leadership, these campaigns have morphed into something that is more calculated, that has become more active. And it's just not about eradicating corruption, it's, of course, also about uh, perhaps eliminating opposition and potential rivals. Perhaps now this has taken a more genuine face, but if we talk about what happened with Poshalai over 10 years ago, I think this was primarily about removing a potential rival. So if you look in China right now, we really don't see any potential rival to Xi Jinping. So the question on many minds, though, is whether this is a targeted approach to restore discipline within the military, or if it's sowing a division, if it's going to create more problems for Xi Jinping. So other questions that have been raised are that will these purges weaken the PLA's trust in its leadership, and by leadership we mean Xi Jinping, and more importantly, how might this impact China's ambitions going ahead, specifically with respect to the US China geopolitical rivalry, with respect to the 2027 military modernization goal. So, these are the questions that have been raised, but the answers to these questions are not really there yet. So, if we talk about how people in China are viewing these purges, are viewing this anti-corruption campaign, what I've seen that on Chinese social media platforms, there is a varied perspective. Some view these purges as necessary to safeguard national security and thereby national pride. And a typical sentiment that has been there, that this cleanup is important for the country to prosper. And this is very important to preserve the national dignity. But for some others, and there have been a few prominent voices on Weibo, that is Chinese Twitter, if we could call it. Some on Weibo are arguing that the approach that, even though the corruption exists within China, but the approach that has been adopted by Xi Jinping is somewhat flawed. And they suggest that Xi's campaign style, um, anti-corruption strategy, are only a temporary fix, and it's not really going to address the root causes, particularly the systemic connection between power and wealth, and the gap between the rich and poor, and the gap between um, the PLA officials and the common people. And in fact, if I may also raise this point, that there is so much corruption in China that, in fact, one of the reasons why the CCP is called a princeling party is primarily because most of the officials, both in the government as well as military, have been some of the richest people in China. But then now, going back to what people are talking about and thinking about these purges, another user on Weibo, he wants that corruption will only resurface once the campaign spotlight fades. So this is, I think, this is a consensus that it's good that the people who are corrupt are being taken care of, but this is not something that is going to resolve this long-standing issue. So what most of the people are saying, that there is a pressing need for China to introduce reform to address this underlying systemic problem. And without addressing these structures, without addressing these systemic issues, the cycle of corruption will continue. So this is something that a lot of people agree on. And a critical issue that has been raised by many is whether Xi's approach is creating more and more instability by stoking blind loyalty rather than fostering genuine reforms. So this raises an even bigger question, that how long can Xi Jinping maintain his grip on power without perhaps triggering deeper divisions within the party, deeper unrest within the party and in the country. So the reality is, while she may be securing his power, consolidating his power further, as there is one man rule, as he is the president for life technically now. So these purges could have long term consequences, and perhaps making the party even more vulnerable to infighting. And in a top down system like China's, where decisions are largely made by Xi himself, this might seem like a controlled strategy, as in, this is definitely working to Xi's advantage. But the question is, as more officials are being purged right now, how it is going to be for China. The very loyalty she relies on may eventually become a double edged sword. Then ultimately the question remains, can she maintain his central control over China without destabilizing the political system he has worked so hard to reshape? And this is one of the reasons why he is the president for life. And I think the answer to this question is only time will tell. So we have to perhaps keep a close eye to what is happening in China, to what extent corruption is going to impact the stability or rather instability within the country, and how she is going to address this. So this is something that perhaps we have to wait and watch. Thank you for watching. So I'll see you next week. Thank you.